Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining me today on this December afternoon, or it's afternoon for me, but maybe something different for you. I'm Trent, the host of this channel, and so we have some people in the chat. Vegas guy from the west coast of California. Okay, thanks. Wasn't aware there's another coast of California, but all right. Brian, hello from Cambridgeshire, UK. Very windy again. Oh, sorry to hear about the fatalities there. Yeah, we have very strong wind here also. So sorry to hear about that. Hi Saul and hi Teek. Great to have you here, Teek. So for those who haven't come here before, usually I have some main topics I'll talk about at the beginning of the stream, kind of like a prepared thing, and then I'll go into Q&A. Today mostly it's just going to focus on Q&A, so that will be the subject of today's stream. I was off for about 2 weeks. We had the holiday weekend last week in the US, so it's good to be back here and hope you're all doing well. Those who celebrated the holiday, hope it went well. I published a couple videos this week. I thought I'd just kind of go over the topics a little bit because I thought it's good to review these things live and give people some chance to ask questions if they want. But in both the videos got fairly good views. The first one I did was on this, how selections actually work. So I thought I'd go over that a little bit. It's kind of a more niche subject, but it has kind of one pretty useful implication I think comes up often. So let's look at this a little bit. I'll just kind of review some of the stuff I went over in my video here. So I just made this, well, I didn't make it, I downloaded it, this image here. So it's kind of a common, landscape photo of a scene. So I wanted to kind of go over like what selections actually are and how they actually work. So we kind of know usually we make the selections, we have this tool over here, right? So we have all the different options. I'll just use the rectangular marquee tool. So I can draw a rectangle and I can add a pixel layer and I can paint inside of it here. So, nothing terribly shocking at this point. I'll just paint inside my selection. And you can see it kind of works the way we expect it to. Like I can paint inside the marching ant area, but not on the outside. And that's kind of typically how we think of selections working. But there's actually a couple subtle points going forward I just wanted to mention. Let me delete this and do it again. One thing we can do is make a selection from a mask. So if I add a mask to this image, I can alt click on it. And this is what my mask looks like. Let me invert it. So, if my mask is all black, my image is completely hidden. Let's kind of show some stuff on our, let's show some stuff. I'll just use my paintbrush. Let's make a big, just a white circle here. Like that. So now if I go back and look at my image, I can actually see it. This is what my mask, this is what my mask looks like. This white circle is just going to show my image like that going through. Now you can do is you can make a selection from your mask as well. So for example, I can, if I control click on my mask, you can see it makes a selection around the edge. And once again, I can paint, inside the selection. And it's not very surprising or interesting. So kind of the same thing as we usually see. But there's one kind of twist we can throw into the mix, which I want to show you here. And I kind of discovered this, I shouldn't say I discovered it, but I kind of realized it a couple months ago when I was doing something else. And it kind of surprised me, and and it kind of explained how some other things work. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to show it. Let me add another mask here. And this time, I'll invert it again. Instead of creating that hard circular mask, let's create like a gradient on it. So let's do this. Let's do a radial gradient. I'll put it in here. So now I have this type of mask happening. If we look at the image, this is what's going on there. So again, not too much of a surprise. You can see the edge of the mask is kind of fading away. And that's how masks work. But what happens if I control click on this mask now? So let's do that. I'll control click on it. And you can see it made a selection like around here. Previously on my mask, when I created the selection, it created it on the stark white black boundary, but it doesn't really have that anymore. So now it kind of put it in this part here. And this is actually middle gray here. That's when you create a selection from the mask, it's looking for that middle gray area if you don't have these sharp division areas. So now it's kind of interesting though. Here's the part that was kind of cool to me. Is now when I paint through the selection, it's actually going outside the selection a little bit. Like this. So your eyes aren't fooling you here. The green is actually going outside the selection. And that kind of violates like what we used to think, or what we typically think selections as doing. Like, how can you actually paint outside of it? And this kind of goes down to the fact that what the selection actually is. What these lines represent. And this is kind of a subtle point, but what these lines represent is it's not actually an inside and an outside to your selection. What it represents is the 50% cutoff in the transparency of your selection. So you can see what this did is, let me do this. It selected this halfway point on my image here of my mask. This is actually, your selections actually have an opacity to them, even though it's not really visible. It might not seem that way. So let's go back here. By the way, I should have turned off the mask just to prove this point. So when you do selections, it's not necessarily you have an inside and an outside. You actually, the selections themselves have like a transparency value to them, and you're seeing the cutoff point of the 50% transparency. Now let me show you an example of like why this actually matters, because most of the time it doesn't matter, but there are some situations where it does. Let's look at. You may have kind of wondered this if you've ever used the refine tool. Opening a file here, trying to open it. So let's say we want to select this guy and isolate him. So I'll use the selection brush tool over here. Selection brush tool. And let's just fill it in. I'll just select him. And you can see it's going to be kind of difficult because, the hair is always very challenging to select. So I'll do this here. So it's a fairly okay selection. Now what I'll do is I'll click refine. And this is the tool where we can kind of clean up our selections a little bit. So I'll click refine here. And I won't go into like super detail what this whole thing means, but in general, you can kind of have Affinity re-look at the edges if you want it to kind of clean it up a little bit. So I have it selected to matte here. Hi, Joan. Straight from the train. Okay, cool. Hope you didn't encounter any traffic or anything. So the mattes, when you have this matte selected, when I select over an area, it tells Affinity that this is the border between two things. So it tries to look at it again, and it kind of refines it a little bit. Hi, Kep. So I'll refine it over here. And I'll just kind of refine his hair a little bit. And it's kind of hard to see maybe for you because like it's red on red. So sometimes the colors could be a little challenging. But anyway, it's just refining the selection. Now the key thing is that we can output to a selection here. So when it tries to isolate this thing, I'll click apply and it'll make a new selection. So I'll click apply. Now you may be kind of wondering like what's the point of this whole tool? Like isn't that selection here? If I zoom in, I mean we have this very complicated hair, but look at the selection. Isn't there just like inside and outside? How does that help me? Well, if I add the pixel layer here, you'll see what we saw before. Let me select the brush. Notice how I can actually paint inside the hair, but some of it's also going outside. Okay. So it's not just inside the selection. It's actually, the selection is actually representing kind of a soft edge, if you will. You have a little bit of the ability to go there. Hard to follow when you're not staying on task and bouncing. Okay, I'll try not to bounce too much. Do you mean the mouse cursor or me? But so I'll zoom out a little bit here. So just to review, I'll go over what I did again. This is giving the selection boundary here, okay? So let's zoom in. The boundary actually has a softness to it, all right? So this is something like is helpful to keep in mind, like you're not actually having a hard edged selection here. Now again, I don't know why I'd want to paint hair green, but if you're trying to clean up the edges of something, that is how these tools work. And it's not just these selection tools here. You also have, there's a lot of tools that make selections where the boundary of the selection is actually kind of softer. So let's look at one more example. So here we have this landscape, and if you go to the select menu up here, there's lots of options for selecting based on like color range and tonal range and things like this. So let's do shadows. So this is what it assumes is selecting these shadows. Now, once again, hi son, if you select the brush, I can basically paint like clear across a lot of boundaries. And some of them are kind of soft, but if you go in, or some of them are actually quite hard. Let's zoom in. You can see I'm painting out a little bit. It depends on what tool you're using. And actually, I didn't do the right thing there. Let's try another example. Select sampled color. So maybe I'll choose some type of green value here. And it's not terribly important if you know what these tools do. I'm just trying to show you that the concept of selections aren't as clean as you think. I'll zoom in a little bit. So again, I can paint outside of the selection there. So it's kind of a minor thing I wanted to bring up. It was something I made a video about, and a lot of people seem to be interested in how it works, but really the refine options, like I showed on this one, that's where it's going to come into play the most when you're doing these types of the things. So just and there's some other details with it, with the alpha channel and all that. I won't go into that for the moment, but that's just kind of the main gist of this topic here. So if you kind of want a review of it, you know, the video also has it. And certainly if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. But it's just kind of a subtle point, and it kind of explains a little bit about how some of the more complicated selection tools work and how they get the results they do. So let's move on. Can I explain the mesh warp tool? Yeah, so let's see. Oh, that's going to be an Affinity designer, right? So let's look at that. Yeah, I don't know anything about index support, San. Sorry to say that. Like, I don't know. It depends on if they have that language supported or not. So the mesh warp tool, I'll explain Saul's question here. So I'm in Affinity designer right here. So let's look at some type of shape. Again, I'll make a star here. Let's make it yellow. And let me give it a little title here so we know what we're looking at. Okay, so I have a star. I'll just give it a boundary too, so it looks a little more complex. So what you can do here is you can use the warp tools down here. So these are the options in Affinity Designer at the bottom of your layer stack. You have this warp group there. So you can select this. And then you have these different options to warp the vectors. So these are only going to work for vectors. So I can click Mesh here. And I can drag these points around and warp the shape. Okay. And, you know, you can do kind of various things. It also works with text, which is interesting. So let's put this one to the side. I can make some text. I can even give it a different font. Let's give it something like crazy, like something with a lot of detail in it. How about this one? So I can, once again, I'll click my warp group down here. And I'll click Mesh. And I can distort my text as I like. Hi, IH. So this is how the mesh warp works. And the mesh warp is kind of like the basic warp that the other ones are based on. You can change it, I guess, to like quad and all this other kind of stuff. But essentially, mesh warp is kind of the catch-all one that does kind of the the basics. You can add more points to it. So if I have this warp group. Let me just reset this for a second. Let's go back and add my mesh warp. So if I zoom in, I can click on the middle points here, and I don't know if you can see you can't see it when I zoom in, but there's like there's a little squiggly line next to my cursor. So I can click here, and I can add another point in. You know what, you want to be a little careful adding too many points in, but you know, you can do that. And these are kind of your Bezier curves here. So let's zoom in. This is determining like the curve point of the node there. So Saul, was there anything specific you wanted to know about that tool, or does that kind of cover it? I'm trying to think what else I could say about it. What is interesting is, you know, it's dynamic too. So if I change this, let's say I do this all this crazy stuff, I can go back to my text and I can still edit it. So I can say, you know, maybe it's some new text. Although chances are if you change the text, probably you want to change the warp too. But if I resize it, you know, it's still being affected by the warp and all that kind of stuff. I can change the fonts. Let me get it so you can see it. Move it around here so I can change the font dynamically. So you're saying that covers it. You can see it in the Affinity Photo toolbox. Okay, yeah. In Affinity Photo, they do slightly different ones. They do like, you have like this one here. Yeah, so that's like for warping raster images, basically. So I'll show you one thing is that in Affinity Designer, a lot of people, they get frustrated about warping images. And let me show you how to solve that problem. So let's add an image. Let me just find some image online. I don't know, something, anything. So in Affinity Designer, if you have this image here, you may think, well, hey, let's just add some perspective warp to it, just like we did with the vector. So I'll go and I'll add my warp group. I'll choose perspective. And when I drag these dots, nothing, it doesn't do the thing you expect it to, actually. It's kind of confusing for a lot of people. So I see this problem happen a lot. So in Affinity Designer, if you're going to do images, if you want to warp images, you actually have to go to the pixel persona. So that's this one up here. Whoops, pixel persona. And zoom in. That's the workspace of Affinity Designer that lets you do like raster-based images like painting and that kind of thing. So I'll click on that. And now I always forget where it is. I believe it's under Layer, New Live Filter Layer, and then you can choose Perspective and Mesh Warp here. These are the raster-based ones. So if I click Perspective, now I can actually change it like an image. So just to show you that again, let's delete this. I went to the pixel persona and I said Layer, New Live Filter Layer, Perspective. So this is what you need to do for the raster-based images in Affinity Designer. And that's something that kind of a little tricky thing that people miss sometimes. So I hope that helped. It's definitely a useful feature. And I did a couple of typography videos recently showing the mesh warp and all that. So there was one I did recently with kind of like the wavy text and just use mesh warp in that. So that's how that one goes. I did this other video about Photoshop clipping in Affinity, so I just wanted to cover that topic again. Because I know a lot of people, they are coming from Photoshop, and sometimes there's certain things that they wonder how to do in Affinity. So I think it's sometimes they're a little bit different in how they approach things. And clipping is one example. So let me open this. It's coming off my shared drive. All right, let me close these. Just do some housekeeping. It's easier to not have 50 files open. So when we say clipping, what we mean is putting one object inside of another and kind of using the other object to change the shape of it. So I have this image of a beach here. I'll show you several different examples of how we could clip into things. The first case we usually would do it for is just like a shape. So let me create a shape here. Once again, I'll create a star. So I'll just make a star. And I'll make it yellow just so you can see it, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to have a color at all. So let's say I want to have my my ocean here, my image, clipped into my star. So what I can do is I can put my ocean kind of near the star just to get it oriented. And then over here in the layer stack, I'm going to take my beach layer and I'm going to drag it over the name star and I'm going to let go. And now if I expand, you can see the beach is inside the star. And if I zoom in, this is the effect that it's having. So I can move the beach around and it's in that shape. It's contained to that shape. If I have it kind of slightly off of it, you can see that the yellow star is there. But I can move it back into position. I can resize the ocean. I can rotate it around. Can do all sorts of basically, you know, you can just position it wherever you want it to go. So that's one example. Another example is I don't have to use a predefined shape. I can, let me copy this. I can use my own shape that I define. So let's create a, just use the pen tool. And let's just create some random shape. Again, I'll give it a color. And now I'll just do the same thing. I'll drag the beach over here. And I'll drag it in the curve. And I'll let go. So here we have a kind of a random shape. Vegas guy, reading your comment. Yeah, so one thing you're saying is how to make selections based on specific color ranges. Yeah, I'll show you that right after this this topic, because that's something that's possible also. It's called hue range masks and luminosity masks. So there's definitely ways to do that. One thing you may want to do is if you put something in a shape like this, I recommend like for that shape, taking off the color, like disabling the color, because otherwise, even though you can't see the shape, the edge, a lot of times it'll have that, it'll take the, it'll kind of alias in the color of your containing shape. So I recommend like making it nothing for best results. But that's the way you could do it with just a random shape on the pen tool. And of course, one of the more fun ones is you can actually do it with text too. So I'll do the artistic text. And I'll type some text. Ocean, if I can spell. And let's get this, copy this beach out here. And if I expand it, again, I can, over here, I'm going to drag it into the text here. So I'm dragging it over the word ocean. And it goes in like that. So it's a really cool way of putting, you know, an image into your text. Let me undo this for a second. Whoops. Control Z. One mistake you may make is you might drag the layer over the thumbnail here, and that's something different. That's like a masking effect. So if I take this and I drag it over there, if I let go, that's actually going to use, it's almost going to do the reverse in a way. It's going to create a mask effect, like I said. I'll undo that. What you want to do is make sure you drag it over the name of the layer here. So you want to drag this onto the word ocean. Whoops, wow, really zoomed out there. You want to drag it over this way. So I'll drag it there. And it goes into the word like that. Now, one other very interesting concept, and this is used a lot in digital painting, is that you can use this clipping effect not just with images, but with paint strokes and things like that. So let me show you an example of this. So I have a brush. Let me create a pixel layer. So I'll just call this like sphere. And I'll choose some brush. I don't know, let's find something dry media, texture. What is this going to do? So I'll just paint like a circle like that, right? Now if I paint another stroke, let's say something blue, on another pixel layer, let's say I did this, I can actually clip them into each other. So I can drag this up here, and I can take this pixel layer, drag it down below to the sphere, and it's contained in this sphere there. Okay. Now the real use case of this is that when you're painting, a lot of times you'll create some base shape that you want to keep and you want paint inside of it. So I'll erase this, I'll erase that blue. Maybe I just want to shade this sphere here, and I'm using a mouse, which is not the greatest way to do this, but let's say I want to do some dark gray. And let's go back to my paintbrush. You know, I can like shade it like this, and it stays perfectly inside the parent shape. Okay, so you can see what's happening over here, this structure like that. Maybe I want to do some highlights on the side here, you know, something like that. So it's very easy to contain your colors. And let me show you a better example. So you could do this with like raster images too. So I have this red apple here. Again, if I create a new pixel layer, let me hide the green one. I have a new pixel layer here. Let me drag I can just paint the stroke like this. And for the circle, if I dragged it into the red apple, it would be totally contained in that red apple there. So I dragged it inside like this down here. Now, doing a blue stripe isn't that interesting, but what is interesting is doing things like shadows and highlights. So let me add another pixel layer, drag it in. Let's just call it shadow. And maybe I'll set it to like multiply or something like that. So if I select my brush, I can do something kind of dark. And maybe I want like a soft round brush or something. Let's not give it wet edges. So I can shade the side of my, maybe the other side would be better to shade. I can shade the side of my apple, and it's perfectly staying inside that shape. It's not going out at all. Maybe I want the other side to be a highlight, so I can add another pixel layer. Make this highlight. Highlight. I don't know if I spelled highlight right. I think I did. And I can make it like a, I don't know, screen or something. So I'll choose another lighter color. Maybe that's too much. I'll make the other side brighter. So if I toggle these on and off, this is the effect it's having. Like that. So it's quite a good way of limiting the effect to a certain area. One thing I would say is just make sure you have your image rasterized. If you do this with a image layer, like this green apple is an image layer. If I do it again with a pixel layer here, let's do the same thing. I'll just do some gray. Set it to multiply. Notice how it's not doing the same thing. Because the image layer is trying to treat it like as a whole rectangle, and it's trying to like preserve it. So to get around that, you want to rasterize your image layer. So I'll select rasterize. And now if I hover over it, it's a pixel layer. I recommend searching my channel for like pixel versus image layers. It's a subtle difference, but it's something that will come up and probably frustrate you a bunch of times if you're not familiar with why it's working that way. But once you get it to an image or pixel layer, then you can kind of go and constrain the effect again. So that's basically how clipping works in the Affinity programs compared to Photoshop. Photoshop is structured a little bit differently. Like when you clip into the layers, they're above the current layer, and it looks different. And there's some other subtle differences, but that's kind of a crash course right here on how you do it in the Affinity programs. So Vegas guy, let's look at your question. So let's go back to our bird here. So the main way you do that, what you're asking is selecting a range of colors and all that type of thing, is these are the range masks. And down here we have our mask button for masking a layer. But you can actually right click on it, and you have these other advanced types of masks down here. So you have a hue range mask, you have a luminosity range mask, you have a bandpass mask, which is less commonly used, but let's use let's do hue range mask first. So I'll select this one. And now you can see how it's masking based on the color. So over here, we're selecting the middle. It's kind of showing what colors we're targeting. So right now we're targeting like that green area. I can click and drag it and I can shift it. So we're targeting more of like that yellow area. And the areas between the two central dots, that will be like 100% selected. And then it kind of like fades off to the edges there. And you can move these to like tighten it up if you want to control the fade off. You can control the range if you want to. I mean, you can drag these all over the place, but I'll keep it simple for now. But the main thing is that you can move the whole thing and select different bands of color as you want. It's going to be more meaningful in some selections than others. But for example, if I wanted to just select the yellow of the bird, I could select it like that. Okay. And then I have this mask. I believe I can drag it out. So if I wanted to have a pixel layer, well, yeah. I mean, you can put it back. I'll just put it back here. But that's how you could do that. And let me turn this one off. Thank you, Kara. Thanks so much for the donation. Glad it was appreciated. I'll click the heart and the like. Thank you for that. I like it a lot. Let's also add the luminosity range mask. So we do that the same way. We right click on the mask layer and then we say luminosity range mask. And this one, it's been a while since I've used it, but yeah, this is kind of almost like the blend options in a way, where you can kind of, you're declaring what colors you want what ranges you want to filter out. So here I'm saying, well, it's easier to see if I make it really sharp. So here I'm saying, take the lower, I don't know, 30% of colors and just like remove them from my image based on their brightness. So that's how that one is working, like that. And there's also some other ones that you can do. Select. You have some other tools up here, selecting the red, green, and blues. You can do it based on a sampled color. But Vegas Guy, hopefully that kind of shows you the main way of doing what you requested. It's these advanced masking options here. Just right-click on the mask tool down there, and you got these two options there. So that's how you select based on that. And I have videos on that too. If you search those topics on my my channel, you'll find like deeper explanations of how they work. All right, let's scroll down here. So Kat asked this question. It's kind of similar to what we were just talking about clipping. She said, does paint inside text work the same for vector images? So yes, let's look at that just a little bit. I want to give some tips on that. So to kind of clarify the point again, we were talking about clipping, and glad it helped Vegas Guy. We were talking about text. Before I said ocean, and I put an image in it, but we could also put like a pixel layer in it. So I created a new pixel layer here. I'll drag it in. Let me create like a chunkier font. I think something with more weight to it. Now I have this structure down here, ocean with a pixel layer in it. And I made a video about this recently where you can actually like paint inside vectors, and it looks pretty cool. I'm in Affinity Designer right now, so I have to go to the pixel persona. But in Affinity Photo, you just do this in the main thing. And I can select a brush. Let's select something interesting. And maybe, let me make my text blue to start with. It's supposed to make it blue. I don't know why sometimes... Yeah, sometimes in the pixel persona it doesn't do that. I don't know why. But let me select my paintbrush again. And I can paint inside like this. And you can make it look better if you want, of course, but this is kind of something you can do. You can add pixel layer inside your ocean and paint on it. So Kat's question was, can I do the same thing with other vectors? And the answer is definitely you can. Let me open some other vectors here and show you a couple different ways it works and doesn't work. So I have this image here of a cat. Actually, let me do that one second. Let me do another one, a simpler one first. Okay, so I have this vector image of some Christmas trees, right? And I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but over here, this is something like I downloaded from Creative Fabrica, and you're very often going to run into this situation where you have some type of vector composition here, and maybe you want to recolor it and you want to change it, right? So you could select things and you could just, you could use the vector options to recolor things. That's perfectly fine. But if you want to add some more interest and some more variance to it, you could use the paintbrush tools to add some more like texture and things like that. So I'm first going to let me just drag this out to the top. I'm going to delete the layer. Eric, reading your comments. You're fully off Adobe. Great. So you're just using Affinity now. That's great. Yeah, it's nice when you can get rid of a subscription like that and find something to replace it. I know a lot of people also still use Premiere, and kind of another program I like that's an alternative to that is DaVinci Resolve. So for those of you guys that are trying to get off the editing suite, I really like DaVinci Resolve, and I have a bunch of videos coming out on that too. So I recommend it. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add these together. This isn't required, but I'm just going to make it so it's one shape. So I'll click Add, like this. And this is going to depend on your workflow, whether or not you want to do that. But now what you can do is you can add a pixel layer here. And you can put it into the curve. And what you can do is you can actually just start painting inside of your vector. So I could, again, I'll go back to my pixel persona. And again, there are a variety of ways to do this, but maybe I can paint the Christmas text red. And maybe I want to add a little bit of a little more variance to it. So maybe, a more interesting version that way. And one thing I also recommend doing when you're doing this is turning off the, I kind of mentioned this with the other thing. If you zoom in a lot, notice how we have that there's a little bit of a black edge. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's very subtle. But I recommend turning off the strokes and the fills for your vectors. It'll just it'll just make it look a little cleaner. But that was a way we could add a little bit of texture to it, and then we could go back. And maybe we wanted to do something with the trees. So I'll do one tree here. I don't know, maybe this tree I want to be that color. Now we could, whoops, and you have to make sure you don't accidentally do what I just did, which is like go into the other ones. We could color it in like so. I won't do all of them, but I'll just show you like the reason this method is more flexible than just using the vector colors is, you can add some more style to it if you want, maybe want this top to be, yellow. It's not my best artwork ever, but, it kind of gives you an example of what can be done. And you can keep going on with this. Let's do it like a browner tree. You can keep painting like so. So this is a way you could actually like recolor vectors if you wanted. And again, the point I'm making here is like you can actually get a little more texture going on as opposed to just using vector flat colors or just gradients and things like that. So you can keep going like that. Now let's look at another more complicated example. In this case here, we have this cat, and he has a whole bunch of things kind of going on. Let's see. I guess you could take this out. So I downloaded this. Let me show you here if you can see the whole thing. So again, I downloaded this online, and this is what the structure of this vector looks like. So if I turn off various things, you'll see what it looks like. So the white parts are actually they're not transparency, there's actually like white things going on here. So if I turn this off, that's kind of what's happening there. So for something like this, you kind of want to think about it, like how do you want to break it up? What is it you actually want to paint? What is it you want to do? Maybe I just want to recolor the cat itself. So let's put this here. Conveniently, the cat, all the black parts are connected. So if I select the cat, I can change the color of it. Maybe it's dark brown or something. Maybe I wanted that color. But then I could go and I could add a pixel layer to it. So I'll add a pixel layer. I'll put it in the cat. I haven't even done this yet. I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe you could just go and select a brush. And maybe I want to do some shading or something. So let's find some type of, I don't know what a good brush would be. Usually like a noise brush, but I don't know if there's a noise. I thought there was a noise brush, but maybe not. Let's just do the basic soft. And maybe I'll just make it, add some shading. Let me turn off the wet edges. I don't like the wet edges. I almost never use it. Yeah. Add some little shading there. And you can kind of, you can go and, you know, do it as you like. Just add a little bit of character to it. Oh, maybe the ear. So this is before, after, before, after. So, you know, whether or not it's better or worse, it's kind of up to you, but that's the main way you would go and do that effect. You know, find the area you want, maybe add a pixel layer to it, paint inside of it. If you just want to do a solid color, you could just select the vector itself and change it that way. But if you wanted to add more textured effects, you could use a brush. So that's kind of the way to do that. And finally, one more example I'll show. This is kind of reviewing what we did just now. So this is a raster image that I downloaded. So this is not a vector. But let's say I wanted to change the hat. There's a ton of ways to do this, but you could like paint on this itself too. So let's say I want to add some shadows. I'll add a pixel layer. I'll drag it in. And once again, I'll set it to multiply. And let's see. Maybe I want to add some shadows on this side. You know, just give them a little more depth. And I'd do better selections and stuff if this was like a real thing. But, you know, I'm just kind of showing the concept here. Maybe I want more shadows down here. So I don't know, did this improve it or not? Let's see. Kind of a little subtle thing there. I would fix this in real life. Vegas guy, reading your comments. So you bought a couple of the brush packs. Do I have any suggestions on vector brush packs that are worth having? Well, unfortunately, when you say vector brush packs, as far as I know, like Affinity doesn't support vectors yet. I'm not sure what the vector brush packs actually do, because the vector brush pack in Affinity Designer, the vector brushes in Affinity Designer are actually just a raster effect. Yes, yeah. So Teak is making the exact point that the reason they call them vector brushes is because you can change their path. So I'll show you this. Let's create a new file here. So where's the vector brush? I have to find it. Vector brush. So the brushes, they are a raster effect, but you can click and drag, change the points. So I can do this type of thing with them. You can change the path of the brush stroke, but the actual texture it puts down is a raster image with resolution. So that's the thing about the vector brushes right now. So it's kind of an unfortunate way they name them, but that's the way it goes. So yeah. And by the way, I think the Black Friday sale is still going on. So if people are interested in checking it out, definitely go for it. I think it's another couple days, but don't quote me on that. All right, got this question. Is it possible to do a round QR code? Well, you can put the QR code in a round shape if you want. You know, whether or not it's actually a round QR code, I guess, is up for debate. But I'll just create a QR code. If I select the QR code tool here, you know, I do this. I mean, you could like create a circle, you know, and you can put it inside and stuff like that, but I don't know if like a round QR code is actually like a format of QR code. I think it's just they basically have to be this square shape, and you can put them in something roundish, but if you actually chop the corners off and made it round, I don't think it would work anymore. I think that would just be too destructive to it. So that's my understanding of the QR codes right now. Got this question about another one about the vector masks, and let me make this bigger so you guys can see it. It's kind of related to what we're just saying about clipping, which is if you put the object in an image layer and you resize it, are you keeping the scalability of the image layer? And I mean, the scalability of the image is just going to depend on its resolution and how big you're making it. So you have to always keep an eye on that. It's possible, you could put an image inside of a star vector and scale it up really big. The edges of you could put, I guess let me just show you instead of explaining it. What I'm trying to say is, let's put this bird back in here. So let's give it a circle. So I could make this circle super huge, and the roundness of the circle will scale infinitely because it's a vector. That part will be fine, but I have to keep an eye on the raster image inside of it. So, I could make this, I could export this image at 10,000 by 10,000 pixels, and you'd get a very smooth edge to it. But as you can see here, you would get pixelization on the raster part of it. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. And a good way to kind of know what quality you're getting is if you select your image inside here. If you look up here, you'll see how big is it. So probably it's a little bit too big in this case because it's 231%. If I make it smaller, whoops. If I make this, if I make it smaller here, I go back. Now you can see like it's the percentage is less than 100, so it's you're not artificially resizing it. You're shrinking it a little bit. So that's what I would say about that. If you're clipping an image into a vector, make sure you keep an eye on what your image's quality is. And I did that by selecting the image here, and then you can look up there. So Eric, reading your question. Does Affinity have smart objects? Kind of. And that's kind of what I was a little bit about what I was saying earlier, the difference between a raster image and a bitmap image. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by smart objects, but something like an image like this is an image layer here. So what this is going to do is it's going to try to remember all the original pixel data that's with that image. So no matter what I do, I can resize it bigger. I can resize it I can make it smaller and bigger. It's going to remember that information. Now, the difference is that if I made this a raster layer, like if I rasterize this, let me do this at a different level. So if I right-clicked on this and I rasterized it, now it actually is just a grid of pixels and it doesn't have the original image data anymore. It's hard to see the difference in this situation, but the real situation would be, let me make this super small. Let me rasterize it. And now if I make it bigger, you can see that's the problem. It doesn't have that pixel data inside of it anymore. Whereas this one, no matter what I do with it, it still has that pixel information. So yeah, the concept of a smart object is not explicitly in Affinity, but there are certain things where it's kind of there. They just don't have it as a standalone concept. Yeah, that's it, Eric. So Vegas guy, reading your question. Any idea what AI tools can control or work with Affinity software? Yeah, I was using Topaz Photo AI for a little while. I still use it. You can hook it up to Affinity. I ain't really used them integrated that much, but I guess it just depends on what plugins people make. I haven't seen many lately. In the 2.6 release, they're gonna have they call it machine learning. They don't like the word AI, I guess, but they have their you can watch my stream from a couple weeks ago where we looked at the beta for 2.6, and they do the object selection and the subject selection. So they've started to introduce these ML tools, but in terms of like other AI tools that can control or work with Affinity software, I'm not exactly sure. I use Midjourney a lot, and I just I bring in images to Affinity just as images, not really any specific integration, nothing crazy. You just bring in PNGs or JPEGs and work with them. But I guess we'll see going forward what will happen. So yeah, that's the extent that I know right now of it. Let's look at the next question. I got this one from Darlene. Maybe some of you guys have had this experience. If you have any answers, feel free to chip in. She says she was trying to open her old Adobe CS2 and CS 5.5 InDesign files in Affinity Designer. It's not actually working. Is there any way to get it working there? I don't really know of a specific way. I think you'd have to probably start with Adobe and opening those files in Adobe first and get them working. And perhaps once you do that, you can save them as a newer format and then import them in Affinity. But yeah, I mean, I doubt these old formats will work in Affinity. You know, the newer formats are okay, but you know, for the older stuff, I think you'd have to use Adobe to upgrade it to a new version, save the files, and then try importing those. That'd be my best guess for how that could go. Yeah, I hope it works out. I haven't seen these names in a long time. CS and CS 5.5. Got this question from Ale Calbane. Is there a way to make a layer underneath the mask pass through upwards? So put an image behind a layer and mask to pass through, showing the layer underneath. Teak, you're saying would export as SVG and import to Affinity work? It could. I think the problem for her is she's not even able to like open these files to begin with in anything because she doesn't have the newer Adobe versions. So that's the thing. But I think if she actually was able to open them in Adobe, then export as SVG, that's what I would try. So yeah. So this question here, masking below something, yeah, it's kind of possible. Let me show you, but it depends. I wouldn't recommend this, but it's a way you could do it. So let's say I wanted to put this, you know, moon in the sky here. It's above. Okay. But let's pretend the moon was below your image here. So I'll drag the moon below my image. I'll move it over here. So it's hidden, right? So the way we can do this is using the blend options thing and the blend options tool. And this is kind of an advanced thing. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but actually let me do this. Let me call this planet. Let me call this moon just so we know what we're looking at. So with my layer above, what I can do is you can select your blend options. And this is where you can determine what things are shining through the bottom based on their brightness or darkness. And I'll kind of give just a brief crash course on this right now. And then I do have videos on it I recommend for a more detailed explanation. But what you can do is you can choose over here underline composition ranges. This is essentially what the question is actually asking. Can you make something below shine through up top? So what I can do is I can, if I drag this down here, you'll notice this will say, actually I think I want to do it another way. What's the best way to do it? Yeah, I guess this way kind of works. Again, it's not the way I would recommend it, but what I can do is I can bring this down here. And what I'm saying is make the bright parts underneath shine through. I thought there's a better way I did this, but maybe. Yeah, I mean, you have this black part around it too, but so it's kind of like an awkward way of doing it like that, to get something beneath it to shine through. I wouldn't really recommend doing it that way. If possible, I'd say just take your moon, like put it on top. And then from this way, you could actually use the blend options. You could probably get better results doing it from the top. So you could suppress the black. And now you just have the white of your moon there. So what this is doing is it's saying, okay, take everything in my moon image, I'll put that, and make everything that's below 50% black, make it all transparent. And that's what you can see happening over here. And I made it very sharp just to show you the effect, but you can kind of gradually do it a little bit more. And you want to position your moon so there's no stars in the dark part. That's a pet peeve I always have when you see certain things. maybe there is a good place. I guess it would have to like correspond with the light too. But yeah, that'd be my recommendation for that. So Vegas, you're saying you always hated the Adobe file size limits. I'm reading your question here. Oh, that's cool. Finding a website that converts Adobe files to PDFs. Yeah, just be careful that the virus check all that stuff and everything. Excuse me. So yeah, this would be using the blend options. But again, I would say if you're not getting a good result, if you want something to show through, try putting it on top of the layer. Usually that's a better result. Excuse me. It's the dry time of year, and definitely throat's getting a little bit dry. But yeah, I got this other question from Just Alan Jones. He said he was loading a bitmap texture in Affinity 2.5.6, and it was crashing. So yeah, I don't know exactly. I haven't had this issue, but what I recommend if you have these types of issues is if you can go to the Affinity forums and upload your file there. They're very good at helping with these types of things, especially if you can like reproduce it. They're usually right on top of that. And if you can provide a file, they can help a lot. So the Affinity forums, let me see where they are. Yeah, here, forums.affinity.serif. And you can kind of find the customer support things, whether or not you're on desktop or iPad. So I recommend those, submitting there. But yeah, I haven't had this particular problem you're having, so I can't really speak to it. But it's entirely possible. Tell them your OS, tell them what version you're on. And yeah, if you can upload your file, that'd be good too. Got this question from Colin. Can you fit text to the spiral? Yes, so let's check that out. Let me just close some things. So in general, you can basically put text on anything. Let me just show you a quick example. So if you do a circle, if you do like any kind of shape, so if I do the ellipse tool, like a circle like this, if I choose the artistic text tool, if I hover over it here, I can actually like click and I can start typing text. and this works with a whole bunch of things. It works with the circular shapes. It can work with the pen tool. So I'll just select the pen tool. I'll just make some path. So that's my stroke. If I select the text tool, once again, I can hover over my line here, and you can see the T with the curly line under it. That means this is something you can type on. And sometimes you need to kind of change it to get the way you want. But different lines aren't going to look as good as other ones, so you want to make sure you have like a good line to put it on. But you can do it with the spiral tool also. So let's select this. Actually, I want to do it with the QR code after. I'm curious what happened there, but let's try with the spiral tool first. So here's the spiral tool. And I'll select artistic text, and I'll put it here. And you can just keep going. You can type forever. Probably didn't type the alphabet right, but yeah, I guess you can just keep going and going and going. Like that. All right, let's see what happens with the QR code. So it's always going to use the style you used last. If you ever want to clear that, you can just click this button up here, revert to defaults. Let's make like a blue QR code. So if I choose I'll make it black so you can. It's going to do something. I don't know what. Oh, that's interesting. It's like going along the dots. It's going along the shapes. I think I'm going to crash my Affinity Designer here. So yeah, like I said, you can do the text on anything you want, apparently. That's actually like it's like that glitch text you see in certain online forums. So yeah, that's probably not as useful on that shape, but you can basically do it with like anything, like a line, a circle, and the spiral if you want. So that's how that works. So you can put text on anything. All right, got this question from Dummy Doe. If you apply textures on shapes in Affinity Designer, can you import them into After Effects for animation? As far as I know, you should be able to. I don't know what exactly formats you import into After Effects, like if it's PNG or SVG or whatever. But if you can export those from Affinity and probably bring it into After Effects. So I think that should work. I don't know, like I said, I don't know what format it uses, but if it uses standard formats, certainly you can do that. Like we said before, just make sure your vector brush, you know that's going to be a raster effect. And I got this question, is there a way to transfer gradients from swatches to gradient maps? So let me look at that real quick. The short answer is no, unfortunately, but let me just put some context on this question so people know what's being asked. So if I create a bird here, there's this concept of a gradient map, and this is a type of adjustment. So I'll select this button down here. These are the adjustments down here. And there's all sorts of ones. This is where you get your levels and your curves and all that. There's also a gradient map. So if I select gradient map, what that does is it takes these colors and it maps them to the lights and darks in your image. So the reds are going to the dark parts, the greens are going to the middle tones, and the blues are going to the bright parts. Now this default color scheme is very unuseful. It's just like probably, you're going to want to use like more realistic colors. So let's do, I don't know, some type of do dark brown there. Maybe we have like an orange thing going. And then maybe the blue is like that or something. Maybe like this fire effect, I don't know. But, one of the main key things is that you actually change the blend mode to get like a better effect. So right now it's normal. But if I do something like soft light, you can see it has this effect on it, So if I do this before, after. So it's a really cool way of just like kind of adding a little bit of lighting effects to an image. And the question was, well, we have this gradient thing. If I look at my swatches, do I have gradients? Yeah, so I have some gradients in my swatches. Let's find a good one. Let's look at this. I just have black and white gradients. But he was asking, is there a way we can just drag gradients into this tool and just use them directly? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, that would be a cool feature. I asked this. I didn't ask it. I found the question asked on the Affinity forums. And according to them, you cannot do that. So I Googled this question, gradient map from swatches, and you can't actually do a gradients. You can't take one of these gradients and just like bring it over to the gradient map. So that's not supported yet. It would be a nice thing actually, but yeah, it's not there yet, according to the Affinity rep. When did he post it? July 22nd. So it's a couple months ago, half a year ago. So yeah, it's not there yet, unfortunately. But that's how gradient maps work. And I got this question from Joan. She says, a lot of times we do non-destructive pixel layers. Our files have lots of layers in them. What do you do for your final version? Do you export it as a JPEG, or do you flatten the layers in any way? Especially for professional printing when you want to be sure of the results. Yeah, typically for me, I don't flatten my files unless I have to, but I export them as a PNG or a JPEG or something along those lines. That just makes it easier to work with. Usually my files, if I'm outputting them as something, maybe it's like a print-on-demand site and they take JPEGs or they take PNGs. So I'll just export to that format, and that's usually fine for me. Typically, I don't flatten things unless there's like a performance issue. Like if you have a bunch of effects going on and certain filters and stuff, like as you work on things, it can kind of start to slow down a little bit. So if you rasterize them and flatten them, it speeds things up because it's not doing that calculation. It's just baking it all in together. If you do that, I recommend making probably like a backup copy just in case you have to change things. But it's kind of rare that that happens for me. So yeah, I just export it as a JPEG, like you said. If you have complicated printing needs, like you're doing printing on whatever, you're really strict about the CMYK formats or where your output format is, yeah, I'd say you may need to look into other options. But for me, I keep it simple at JPEG and PNG usually. So hopefully that gives you some insight. And if it's professional printing, I would say definitely see what their recommendations are for the formats. They may have guidance on what kind of color formats they want and other things like that. And 300 plus DPI. Yeah, if you can, see what the product size is and try to get as high resolution as possible. That's going to help a lot. It's a good point, Teak. So this is the last question I got for today. Do you need two monitors? This is about OBS. Do you need two monitors to record the screen and the webcam in OBS? So OBS is what I use to record my videos, like my screen. It's what I use to stream right now. So I have OBS running here on the side, actually. And it's what I use to like build this scene that you're seeing here. So my image in the lower left and the other stuff, the webcam and all that, the mic and all that, getting it all together. So the question is from Trey Jackson, do you need two monitors to record a screen and a webcam? You don't need two monitors to use it, but I recommend it. Certainly if you are streaming or something like that, it's very convenient to have a second monitor next to you. And if you're going to be recording your screen a lot, especially if it's like a desktop setup, it helps to have a second screen where you can just have all your notes, your OBS controls, all the other stuff. And your main screen could just be what you're showing people, wherever tutorial you're doing or something like that. So it's not necessary, and if you're going to edit your videos, you can edit it out when you show OBS and all this kind of stuff. So it's not technically required, but I think it's definitely very useful to have two screens if you're doing any kind of video editing or like screen recording. So that'd be my recommendation. My recommendation. Not required, but definitely helps. So that was all I had for today. I'll stay on for another couple minutes just in case you guys have any other questions. Ran a few minutes over today, but that's okay. I'll be back on next week. I was thinking next week I'm finally going to try to do a Midjourney stream and talk about that, how I use it, kind of give you guys a overview of how it works, and just some use cases. Hi Hector. Might talk about like how I use it a little bit with Affinity, but Affinity might not be the main subject of it. I think it will just be kind of a ground up tutorial, a tutorial from the ground up on Midjourney, which is kind of one of the more state of the art image generation tools. No problem, Teak and IH and Hector. So keep an eye out for that. And certainly if you guys have suggestions for other topics you want to see covered, let me know. No problem, Segmentera. No problem being late at all. Certainly let me know in the comments if you have any other topics you want to see covered in terms of design. Joan, looking at your question. So you're saying the problem was you couldn't change the mask size of a rotated rectangle and the borders were visible even in a high quality JPEG. So you had to use a TIFF. Interesting. So when you export it to a JPEG, you got a different result than a TIFF. That's interesting. I'm not quite sure, but if you want to if you could send me like a simplified example, like to my email, like of that effect happening, I can certainly take a look at it and, take a swing at it again next time. Treffer, Midjourney would be cool. Yeah, I think it would be a cool subject. No problem, Vegas guy. Glad it's helpful. So yeah, that's all I had for today. I will see you guys next week and enjoy your week and take care.